Good evening. We have our study of Karma Yoga, restarting after a long gap of maybe 2 months or so. And we'll start with a chant from the our Vedic peace chant. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Saha Viryam Karavavahai Tejasvinavadhitam astu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. May we be protected together. May we be nourished together. May we acquire strength together. May our learning shine forth in our lives. May we not find fault with one another. Om, peace, peace, peace. A beautiful way to start our study emphasizing this idea that we're not studying just to gain some intellectual knowledge. We're not taking up this reading of Karma Yoga just for any other reason than to learn something that we can apply in our lives, that will give us strength, that will nourish us, that will protect us, and will teach us how to work. Because to work is extremely difficult, to work effectively, to work in a way that brings us to freedom. The idea of Karma Yoga is that we take up work as a method of spiritual practice. And the more I study Karma Yoga and the more I think about it, the more I realize that it is the most difficult of the yogas, of the approaches. Because what is the real secret of Karma Yoga? And that's what today's topic is. Non-attachment. Being unattached to your work. Completely giving up any desire for the fruits of your work. And it's so difficult, it's tremendously difficult. So it's certainly not possible without some allied disciplines to help us. First of all, bhakti, cultivating devotion, so that we can offer our work to God rather than simply saying, I'm detached from it. If we offer it to God, then, and we develop this intense love for God, that makes it easier. When we practice meditation, we develop the power of concentration. This will help us in working without attachment. And of course, practicing discernment, strengthening our faculty of discernment, viveka. This will also help us tremendously in the practice of Karma Yoga. So, let us take our minds back for a moment to New York City in 1895. There are some motor cars already, but not too many. It's mostly horses. There is some electricity, but a lot of it's gaslight still. And women do not have the right to vote. December 6th, 1895, Swami Vivekananda arrives in New York from England, and it's cold. It's cold winter, New York winter. And he had, that summer, of course, he had spent in Thousand Island Park teaching the highest teachings to his intimate disciples. Then he went to England. Then he came back to settle down and teach in an organized way. And on December 12th, an advertisement was placed in the newspaper for a stenographer who could take down his classes effectively. And the advertisement was immediately answered. And on the 13th December, Hosea J. Goodwin showed up to become Swamiji's Ganesha, as it were, to take down in shorthand, very skillfully, all of Swamiji's teachings. So we have these records, very accurate records of what Swami Vivekananda actually said. And he immediately started classes. And on Fridays was Karma Yoga. On Saturdays was Raja Yoga. On Sundays, there would be a question session or a public lecture. On Mondays was Bhakti Yoga. Tuesdays he had off. Wednesdays was Jnana Yoga. And Thursdays was off. So this was his very heavy schedule, 2 classes a day. And strangely, it may seem to us, the morning class was the class for advanced students, and the evening class was the class for beginner students. So the way we are reading these classes is first we have read the 4 beginners classes, which were Karma in its effect on character was the first one, discussing how what we do molds our character. Second one, what is duty? And how duty differs according to time, place, and circumstance. And that we are to do our duty in the beginning stages of Karma Yoga. The third class, we help ourselves, not the world. This idea that it is actually impossible to help anyone. But still we try, and in so doing, we perfect our own character. We improve ourselves, we move towards freedom. And the fourth, the last class for beginners, the ideal of Karma Yoga, which brings together all the ideas. And these were the 4 evening classes. Now, then we started reading the advanced classes. It could be interesting to read them also in the order in which he delivered them. But so far, it seems that the logical way to study it is in order of beginners classes first, and then advanced classes. The first advanced class was each is great in his own place. And that very amusing and yet demonstrative story at the end epitomizes the topic in which each is great in his own place, the perfect householder versus the perfect monk was demonstrated in that story. So the perfect householder was the birds who sacrificed themselves to feed the guest. And the perfect monk was one who spurned the offer of a kingdom and a beautiful princess as a wife and all those things, because that was his ideal. Now we come to the 6th class of Karma Yoga, the 2nd class for advanced students, called The Secret of Work. And of course, these classes are unfolding at 228 West 39th Street in New York, on the 2nd floor of a brownstone. What do they call those? They just call them brownstones in New York. And they all look the same. And on this street, as it turns out, it was not perhaps the most, not the best part of town, shall we say. In fact, some research reveals that there were houses of prostitution on this street. And perhaps even prostitutes living in his building, because Swami Vivekananda would say, at 20, I was the most uncompromising fanatic. I wouldn't walk on the same street of the theater, on the same side of the street as the theaters. And at 34, I can live in the same house with prostitutes and wouldn't think of saying a word of reproach to them. Is it degenerate? Or is it that I'm opening out into that universal love, which is the Lord himself? And so he said this, and now it turns out that very likely it wasn't hypothetical, because this was that kind of neighborhood, and so this is the kind of giant that Swami Vivekananda was. So he's giving the classes. It's two rooms, 2 parlors connected to one another, and 70 to 120 people would be packed into these parlors. And it's Friday, December 20 in the morning. December 20, the weather had warmed up. It was not to be a white Christmas in New York this year. The low was 47 degrees Fahrenheit, and the high was a balmy 60 degrees. It's like the weather here in LA today. And in the news, well, recent news was that they were looking for election fraud, and there were major storms in the West which caused a lot of damage. It's sometimes helpful to look at news reports of 100 years ago, and you find Very little changes. The same news, different names, different scandals, but actually they're all the same things that have happened before. Election fraud, storms have caused damage. Okay, so now that we see that the things just go around and around, and our goal, says Swami Vivekananda, in the very beginning of his Karma Yoga lectures, the goal of Karma Yoga and of all yoga is what? Freedom. The goal is freedom. The goal is to attain freedom through yoga, in this case, through the yoga of work. So let's dig into the class. You can follow along in The Secret of Work. However, I am reading from the London edition, which was published by E.T. Sturdy without permission. He published the transcripts that he received of the classes, making almost no changes. So it's almost a verbatim print of the class, whereas in the complete works of Vivekananda and the published book Karma Yoga, it was edited at Swami Vivekananda's own instruction. He instructed his disciples to edit his classes so that they would make proper books. And he may even have reviewed those edits, but for my interest especially, and I think you will also enjoy reading his direct language, which in some cases is a little fresher than the edited version. So it begins like this. In regard to the subject of helping others, with which we ended our last, we are to go on a little further. Now, in the last class was each is great in his own place. It doesn't seem to discuss helping others that much. But anyhow, obviously, it's a part of the topic of Karma Yoga, helping others. Helping others physically by relieving their physical needs is indeed great. But the help is greater according as the need is greater, and according as the help is far-reaching. So he's going to give an example of what he means by this. If a person's wants for an hour can be removed, it is indeed helping him or her. But if the wants can be removed for a year, it will be more help to this person. And if his or her wants can be removed forever, it is the greatest help that can be given. Perfectly clear. The more we can help someone, the longer that help will continue in their lives, the more we are actually giving help. And so the old saying, give a hungry person a meal. I think the saying is fish. Give a hungry person a fish, and he or she eats for a day. Teach that person how to fish, he eats for a lifetime. So Swami Vivekananda then explains that spiritual knowledge is the only thing that can remove our miseries forever. Any other knowledge satisfies wants only for a time. So he doesn't discount physical help. He doesn't discount it. He acknowledges its necessity. And when he founded the Ramakrishna Mission, just 2 years later in India, that was one of the first approaches to give physical help, because that was the urgent need. People are starving. They need food. We have to feed them. You can't teach starving people anything, neither secular knowledge nor spiritual knowledge. And Sri Ramakrishna used to say, religion is not for empty stomachs. So we have certain basic needs that have to be fulfilled first. Certain basic needs for food, for shelter, and for, frankly, also social support, family, healthy social milieu. And then we can start to give higher knowledge. Education first, then, finally, spiritual truth, which is the only thing, as Swami Vivekananda puts it here, though it's not a thing, that can remove our miseries forever. If the nature of the person be changed, then alone all his or her wants will vanish forever. This idea of Purana Kamaha, it's a beautiful Sanskrit term. Kamaha is desire. This is what characterizes human existence on the lower plane. We want. We are constantly craving for something. What we want exactly we don't know, so we seek for money, we seek for power, we seek for pleasure. Constantly seeking, kama. And we're trying to still those desires. We're trying to satisfy those desires. And we do. I want money, I get some money, I get a little joy, I get a little taste of joy. Nowadays the scientists will say that's a serotonin hit. You get a hit of serotonin in the brain, and that gives you that peace. And that's what fuels addiction. Vedanta will put it a little bit differently. We will say, the analysis is that restlessness caused by that desire, that feeling of lack, is stilled for a moment. And for a moment, as the mind becomes still and calm, the natural bliss which lies at the very root of our being, which is our own true nature, rises up, and we taste just a little bit of that joy, which is our true nature. That desire is stilled for a moment. But another desire comes, or that desire comes again. We eat ice cream today, and that desire is stilled. But tomorrow, I want to eat ice cream again. And if I don't get it, I feel that craving. Or smoke a cigarette, or whatever it is that is. So this purna kamaha, all desires are fulfilled. How is it possible when all desires are fulfilled? It's possible when we realize that we are complete and infinite, that our true nature is infinite bliss. When we touch that spring of there's that song, "Thou the spring of my infinite bliss." When we touch the Lord, when we touch the divine, which is the spring of infinite bliss, then all desires become fulfilled, all desires become stilled. So for that to happen, says Swamiji here, our nature has to change. We have to realize the divine. It is only with the knowledge of the Spirit that the faculty of want is annihilated forever. So here he puts it succinctly and beautifully. With the knowledge of the Spirit, the faculty of want, that part of us which is such a strong part of desire, that is annihilated forever. Therefore, he says, so helping a person spiritually is the highest help that can be given to him or her. One who gives a person spiritual knowledge is the greatest benefactor of humankind. And as such, we always find that they were the most powerful of people who have helped humanity in its spiritual needs, because it is the basis of all other works in life. I'm only editing a little bit as I read, just for full disclosure, because Swamiji was speaking in 1895, and what we now call patriarchal language, it's not gender neutral. So I'm editing a little as I read to make the language gender neutral, which is appropriate in this day and age. And surely, if Swami Vivekananda were speaking today, he would also use this language. But the language is, if the nature of the man be changed. Well, he's talking about people. And the classroom was at least half full of women, probably more women than men were attending his classes. But this was the language of 1895. So one who gives spiritual knowledge is the greatest benefactor of humankind. And that is why the great teachers who are the greatest givers of, whom do we remember as the greatest human beings? Those spiritual giants who gave spiritual knowledge. Rama, Krishna, Buddha, Jesus, Chaitanya, Ramakrishna, Vivek, we are apt, at least we followers of Swami Vivekananda, are apt to place him also in this category. And spiritual needs, also he gives this idea, spirituality is the basis of everything else also. Then this final paragraph sentence of the paragraph, Spiritually strong and sound people will be strong in every other respect if they wish it. And until there is spiritual strength in humankind, even the physical needs cannot be satisfied. So we start with, of course, we have the physical needs, but they will never be satisfied until we have developed spirituality. They can be satisfied to a certain extent, but that's the nature of the mind. We always want more. We always want more. I have a roof over my head. I have a small apartment. I want a house. I have a small house. I want a big house. So Swami Vivekananda continues, next to spiritual comes intellectual help. So he's giving us the different kinds of help. Intellectual help is next. The gift of knowledge is a far higher gift than that of food and clothes. It is higher even than giving life to a person, because the real life of a person consists of knowledge. Ignorance is death, and knowledge is life. That's why with the Ramakrishna mission also, Swami Vivekananda wanted that we need to bring education to the people who are in ignorance, starting with secular education. First food, then education. And Swami Vivekananda wanted the monks to go from village to village with, he called it a magic lantern, the slide projector. Now, of course, we have a video, all the video things, but in those days that was advanced technology, was the magic lantern, in which a glass slide is placed and a lantern, probably a kerosene lantern or something behind it, and with a lens, images are projected, and we'll go with a globe, show people, look, this is what this earth is, and here is India, and there are other countries, all these things. People hadn't seen these things in the villages of India. He wanted this education also to reach the masses, to lift people up. And intellectual knowledge, and of course, finally, spiritual knowledge as the highest teaching, as the highest gift to humanity. Life is of very little value if it is a life in the dark, groping through ignorance and misery. And finally, he comes to physical help. Next in order comes, of course, helping a person physically. So in considering the helping of others, we must always bear in mind not to commit the mistake of thinking that physical help is the only help that can be given. Physical help is the last and the least, because there is no permanent satisfaction. He actually takes up, we help ourselves, not the world. In the next class, because this was Friday, December 20, and on Friday, January 3rd, in the evening, he takes up the subject, we help ourselves, not the world. So there are two sides. On the one hand, yes, we are striving to help others, and yet we understand that we cannot actually truly help someone. It is, we only improve ourselves. And yet we do see sometimes, we see someone moving forward. Actually, it is spirit, the only true help, the only true and lasting help we can give is spiritual knowledge. And how does that come? We cannot give it actually. I cannot give you spiritual knowledge. That comes through divine grace. Realizing the divine comes only through divine grace. So our job is only to point it out, that this is the way, this is what the sages have said. This is the path that the sages have tread and that they give to us also to tread. And then we leave it to God. And we also are treading that path. We are also striving for illumination. And we share our experiences. We give as much guidance as we can. And finally, it's up to the divine grace. So what we can do is suggest how we ourselves have raised our sail and how others can raise their sails to catch the breeze of divine grace which is always blowing. Physical help is the last and the least because there is no permanent satisfaction. The misery that I feel when I am hungry is satisfied by eating, but the hunger returns again. Misery can only cease when I am satisfied beyond all want. Then hunger will not make me miserable. No distress, no misery, no sorrow will be able to move me. That's also an idea. Religion is not for empty stomachs. But once one has spiritual realization, then an empty stomach cannot make me truly miserable. I am established. Yes, I will feel it. I will feel hungry perhaps. But I cannot be shaken from that state of rock solid sthita prajna, of having the mind fixed in the divine at all times. So that help which tends to make us strong spiritually is the highest help. Next to it comes intellectual help, and after that, physical help. Now, here comes an important teaching he's going to give us, which is so difficult to, it's so easy to forget, because there's this idea that we can make this world perfect, that we can really solve all the problems in this world if we just get our act together and we have the right political leaders and we have the right scientific advancement. We can solve the miseries of the world. And to a great extent, many of the miseries of the world have been solved, and yet new ones keep cropping up. So Swamiji points out, the miseries of the world cannot be cured by simple physical help. It's a really good reminder, because we tend to think, and if you read the newspapers, you get that idea that, well, we just have to get the right laws in place and provide the right physical arrangements and things will be okay. No, misery will not cease only by physical help. Misery will continue until when? Until humanity's nature changes. These physical needs will always arise and miseries will always be felt. And no amount of physical help given to the world will cure that misery. Period. He makes it very clear. The only solution of the problem of all this misery in the world is to make humankind pure. In other words, to develop spiritually. All misery is caused by what? What does Swamiji always come back to? What is the cause of misery, the root cause of misery? Desire, or in this case, ignorance. Usually he comes back to ignorance, that the misery is caused by ignorance. Ignorance is the mother of all the evil and all the misery we see. Let people have light. Let them be spiritually strong. And if we can accomplish this, if all humankind becomes pure and spiritually strong and educated, then alone will misery cease in the world, and not before then. So it's that old question, is it actually possible that misery will cease? Buddha's insight is that the very nature of life here is that it's unsatisfactory, that we can never fully end misery here in this world. This is the same teaching of Vedanta, as Sri Krishna puts it so succinctly in the Gita, anityam asukham lokam imam prapya vajasamam. Having come into this world which is impermanent, anityam and asukham, tainted with suffering, with misery. Not that there's no happiness here, but our general experience is happiness and misery, they follow each other again and again in the circle, and it often seems that there's a lot more misery than happiness. So what's the remedy? Worship me, says Sri Krishna, in that particular verse, of course. So it's a sobering realization, and yet it helps us if we can realize it deeply. All right, so I cannot solve all the misery in this world by trying to help the world. But there is a solution to misery. There is a solution. And the solution is removing our ignorance, touching the divine, growing strong in spirituality. And this, it's a kind of hypothetical question, because it's not possible in this world for everyone to attain spiritual illumination. And yet, great sages like Swami Vivekananda pledged that may I be born again and again, but I will not stop until all humanity knows that it is one with God. So his pledge, like the Bodhisattva vow, to come again and again, not to stop working, ready to sacrifice until all attain realization. And we have that assurance from Vivekananda himself and from Sri Ramakrishna. All will be fed, says Sri Ramakrishna. It's called Sarva Mukti. All will attain liberation, without a doubt. Only, he says, those who come to the Annapurna temple in Varanasi, some get fed in the morning itself. Some have to wait till noon. Some maybe get food in the afternoon, and some have to wait till late at night to get their food. But all will be fed. In other words, all will attain liberation. All will attain realization, as a matter of course. But how many lifetimes it may take, how many lifetimes of misery it may take, that is not, that is another question. But we have come here. We have a longing for liberation. We have a longing for spiritual truth. Otherwise, we would not have gathered in this temple or gathered online. We have some people joining us online. We would not be watching somebody reading something that was spoken over 100 years ago about how to work, unless we had that interest and that desire. So that means the end is in sight. We can see the light at the end of the tunnel. Don't fear. It's not an endless, eternal coming and going and coming and going. Yes. Let us go forward into the light. Let humanity have light. Let them be spiritually strong. And if we can accomplish this, if all humanity becomes pure and spiritually strong and educated, then alone will misery cease in the world, and not before then. We may convert every house, says Swamiji. We may convert every house in the country into a charity asylum. We may fill the lands with hospitals, but the misery will still be there until humanity's character changes. Interestingly, he puts it here that he puts character. He doesn't even say until humanity has spiritual realization. He says until the character changes, until our character becomes pure. So now he's going to quote from the Gita. We read in the Bhagavad Gita again and again that we must all work incessantly, but all work must be composed of good and evil. We cannot do any work which has not some part of good somewhere. There cannot be any work which will not injure someone somewhere. So every work must necessarily be a mixture of good and evil. This is an interesting point. If you think about it, try to think of something which would be perfectly good and wouldn't harm or injure anything or anyone. It's very difficult to think that there are some defect accompanies every action, every work. We try to do things which have more of good and less of bad in them, of course. But if you think of I mean, just to think of, say, I'm feeding a hungry person, so I get some food and I put it on a plate and I feed the person, and he is fed. What bad could there be in that? Well, I was just thinking of how I fed a person the other day, and I put the food on a paper plate. And the paper trees had to be cut down to make that paper plate, and then it's thrown into the garbage, and it goes into the landfill, and it's not very ecologically sound. So there is a little bit of harm, at least there. The food which was grown, there was probably some insects were killed, so there was harm to some living beings in the creation of that food. All right, so there's a small amount of harm. We can think of a harmful deed. A robber goes to a bank and robs the bank of $10,000. So it harms, it hurts people, and people are terrified. Maybe he even shoots someone and injures someone. It's a very wicked deed. But then he has this $10,000, and maybe he gives a few $100s to someone who is broke and starving, and that person can eat for a week. So some good maybe comes out of a wicked deed also. So we can say that, to say that something's only absolutely evil and there's no good could possibly come out of it, Swamiji says, not possible. It's not possible. Either way, work is a mixture of good and evil. So he says, on the one hand, this is the case. Every action has both sides to it, and yet we have to work. We have to continue to work incessantly. The good and the evil will both have their results, make their karma. The good action will entail upon us good effect, the bad action, bad effect. But, now here's the interesting point, good and bad are both bondages of the soul. In the Song of the Sannyasin, Swamiji puts it very poetically. Who sows must reap, they say, and cause will bring its sure effect. Good, good, bad, bad, and none escape the law. But whoso wears a form must wear the chain. Too true. But fetters, though of gold, are not less strong to bind. Then off with them, sannyasin bold, say Om Tat Sat Om. So the good brings good. The good is a fetter of gold, and the bad a fetter of iron. But it's a fetter all the same. So this is where we're leading gradually towards the idea that since all work is accompanied by both good and evil, we want to give up the evil as much as possible and do only good. But even good is a fetter, though of gold. Hence, off with the fetters, off even with the good fetters. Therefore, detachment. Don't accept the karma. Otherwise, every action that we do has its, who sows must reap. Every action has its reaction. Every work we do will have its effect on us. Of course, there are different levels of karma phala, fruits of work. I cook a meal and I eat. Immediate effect. I stick my hand in the fire, I burn my hand. Immediate effect. Then, the effect on the mind, the effect on character, which was the first class Swamiji took up, karma and its effect on character. I do a good deed. That creates a samskara, a tendency to do another good deed. Or I do a harmful action, and a tendency is created in my mind to repeat that action. So this is the second kind of effect of karma, when how it affects our character. And third is this kind of cosmic result, that a good action done has this cosmic result in the future, bringing us some experience of enjoyment or pleasure. And likewise, a negative action now results in the future in some experience of misery. So the good and evil will both have their results, make their karma. The good action will entail upon us good effect, the bad action, bad effect. But good and bad are both bondages of the soul. The solution reached in the Gita is that if we do not attach ourselves to the work, it will not take any effect on us. We will try to understand what is meant by this non-attachment to work. So now he's going to take up non-attachment, which is the real secret of work, which is the title of this class, though I do not believe Swami Vivekananda gave these titles. I think he was just the second class for advanced students, and afterwards the titles were probably given. But it's a good title, The Secret of Work. It is the one central idea in the Gita: work incessantly, but be not attached to it. Okay, now he's going to take this idea of samskara. He says samskara can be translated very nearly by the word tendency. taking our old simile of the mind as a lake. He must have already taken this up in Raja Yoga. He's also giving Raja Yoga classes at this time, and he likens the mind to a lake. So he's referring to that, taking our old simile of the mind as a lake. And of course, the true self, the Atman, is the floor, what do you call it? The very bottom of the lake. And but we cannot see the bottom because the ripples in the water, and that stirs up mud, and so the water is not clear, and the ripples, so we cannot see the bottom of the lake. But if the lake becomes completely placid, no ripple at all, then all the mud, the dust, all settles to the bottom, and you can see straight to the bottom of the lake, which is our true self. That's the idea of the simile of the lake. Taking our old simile of the mind as a lake, every ripple, every wave that rises in the mind, when it subsides, does not die out entirely, but leaves a mark and a future possibility of that wave coming out again. This mark, with the possibility of the wave reappearing, is what is called samskara, this tendency, the tendency of the mind to move in the same old groove. The more we do something, the more we are apt to continue to do it. And that's why it's very hard to break bad habits. But it's also, once we understand this, once we understand the science of this, it's also relatively easy to develop good habits. Once we understand that a habit is formed simply by doing, and it starts with thought, and then thoughts manifest as actions, and actions repeated become habits, and take all your habits together, and that's what your character is. And your character ultimately determines your destiny. Each work that we do, each movement of the body, each thought in the mind is leaving such an impress on the mind stuff. And even when they are not obvious on the surface, these marks are sufficiently strong to work beneath the surface subconsciously. So we may not always understand how our actions or even our thoughts are leaving marks on the mind. And yet, Swamiji points out, every action, every thought even, leaves its mark. We may not be aware of it. It may be working subconsciously. What we are each moment is determined by the sum total of these impressions on the mind. So he's talking about character. The sum total of our samskaras is our character. What I am just at this moment is the effect of the sum total of these marks of my past life. This is really what is meant by character. Each person's character is determined by the sum total of these impressions. If good impressions prevail, he says, that character becomes good. If bad, that character becomes bad. If a person continually hears bad words, thinks bad thoughts, does bad actions, his or her mind will be full of these impressions or marks, and they unconsciously will govern the tendency of his or her work. In fact, these impressions are always working, and the these impressions are always working, and the expression will be evil. That person will be a bad person. He cannot help it. She cannot help it. The sum total of these impressions will create the strong motive power for doing bad actions, and he or she will be a machine in the hands of his or her impressions, and they will force him or her to do evil. Interesting. We become like a machine in the hands of the impressions that forms our character. Very little of what we do is done fully consciously, with a fully awakened will, with a fully awakened conscious self-consciousness. What are we doing? Mostly we run in the same old ruts. And if those ruts are positive, we'll run in good ruts. If we've trained our mind to think good thoughts, if we've trained our mind to turn towards God, the mind will continue to turn towards God. If we've trained our mind to find fault with others all the time, if we've trained our mind to look always at how we can take advantage of others, it'll continue. and it's very difficult to break out of it. So the importance of thinking about this is that it reminds us of how careful we ought to be in our work, in our action, in our thoughts even. How careful we would like to be even regarding the thoughts we think, because each thought leaves this impression. And very often we become like machines in the hands of our own impressions. So the call is to wake up, to not be a machine, to be fully awakened. But we start by going from negative tendencies to positive tendencies. Directions towards taking us away from the divine versus tendencies which take us towards the divine, which take us towards unfolding our innate divinity. So similarly, Swamiji gives the example of someone who does good. If a person thinks good thoughts and does good works, the sum total of these impressions will be good, and they, in a similar manner, will force him or her to do good in spite of himself. In spite of herself, she will do good. When a person has done so much good work and thought so much good thought, there is then an irresistible tendency in this person's nature to do good in spite of herself, in spite of himself. And even if this person thinks of doing evil, the mind, in the sum total of its tendencies, will not allow him or her to do so. The tendencies will turn this person back. He or she is in the hands of, at the mercy of, his good tendencies. When that is the case, that person's character is said to be established. Very interesting. We are here, he says, we are at the hands of, at the mercy of our tendencies. And when our tendencies become good, then we are at the mercy of our good tendencies. And likewise, of our bad tendencies. So we, of course, we have both in us. And we have all done things that we regret. We've all done harmful things. We've also all done good things. So the first step is, and he'll bring up this example a little later of Sri Ramakrishna's example of using good to overcome the bad, and then going beyond both. As Sri Ramakrishna's example, you're walking on the path and you get a thorn in your foot. And it's a small thorn and it's difficult to remove. What do? You need something. Well, you're on the path, you find another thorn. So you can carefully tease out the thorn which has entered your foot. So you tease out the one thorn with the other thorn. And once you've got it out, what do? You throw both of them. You don't need that second thorn anymore. You only needed it to remove the one thorn. So we remove the thorn of ignorance with the thorn of knowledge. And then we go beyond both knowledge and ignorance. We remove the thorn, and it is a terrible thorn, of wicked samskaras, of negative tendencies in our minds, with the thorn of good tendencies. And once we have done that, then it's time to go beyond even good tendencies. And that's where this non-attachment in work comes in. And then Swamiji gives he's going to refer back to the Gita. As the tortoise tucks its feet and head inside of his shell, and you may kill him and break him in pieces, yet they will not come out. Even so, that person who has the power of truth in the centers, in the organs, his or her character is established. Chapter 2 of the Bhagavad Gita. Like the kurmaha, the organs, when we have such control over our organs, the indriyas, the organs of sense and the organs of action, when we have mastered them, we can hold them within and nothing can cause us to bring them out unless we ourselves will it. Then our character is established. Such a person controls his or her forces, and nothing can draw them out against his or her will. By this continuous reflex of good thoughts, good impressions moving over the surface of this mind, the tendency becomes strong for good, and the result is that we control the Indriyas. What's our time? Okay, we're getting into a whole other field. So I think we should wrap it up pretty soon and see if anyone has questions. If you have any questions. I think perhaps this is a good place to stop. Only that now just to give a little preview of what we're going to take up when we continue this class, is that when we attain this mastery over our indriyas, the centers behind the organs of both sense and action, then we get established in our character, and such a person will not do a wicked deed ever, even if you put such a person in a wicked company. And then Swamiji brings in the next step, which is still higher. Not simply doing good, not simply being a blessing to others, but the desire for liberation. This desire for the highest goal, liberation. Freedom, and so let me read just a little sentence from a little bit further on. Freedom of the soul is the goal of all these yogas. The difficulty is here. Liberation means entire freedom. Freedom from the bondage of good as well as from the bondage of evil. A golden chain is as much a chain as an iron chain. There is a thorn in my finger, and I take another thorn to take the first thorn out. And when I have taken it out, I throw both thorns aside. I have no necessity for keeping the second thorn, because both are thorns after all. So the bad tendencies are to be counteracted by the good tendencies, and the bad marks and tendencies of the mind should be conquered by fresh waves of good marks until they almost disappear, are subdued, or are held in control in one corner of the mind. But after that, the good tendencies have also to be conquered. Thus, the attached becomes the unattached. Work, but let not the action or the thought produce an impression on the mind. Okay, I think that's enough. This is where he's going with it, that we have come as far as establish our character through good actions, and next comes going beyond even that, how by this secret of work, non-attachment, which is the most difficult thing we can do. And I think this kind of studying how actions affect the mind, is very helpful for developing detachment. And the earlier points he brought in about how the highest kind of help, the physical help, is no real help at all. It's very temporary, and that the highest help is spiritual help. All these are helping us develop the conviction that we need to learn this, that we need to learn the secret of work, that we need to learn how to detach from the results of our action. Any comments or questions?
He was dealing with maybe 3 billion people, and some time ago in the 20th century even, I was young, there were 4 billion people. And then suddenly there was 7, and last month the world turned 8 billion people. And it's turned into a behavioral sink. It seems to me that religion is something that it's not so much this me thing, but we transcend into some spiritual reality of light and opening of being and transcendence. But I know that that isn't part of karma yoga, is it?
Oh.
It's certainly part of Vedanta.
Well, you said that we're now up to 8 billion from 2 billion to 8 billion, and
He wasn't dealing with the same world we're dealing with.
But it's the same world. It's the same world. You read go to the library and go to the microfilm section. Do they still have microfilms in libraries? Maybe. And look at the newspapers. Go read the LA Times from 1895 and see what you read there. See, or I don't know, were they around in 1895? Might not have been established yet. But, or go read the New York Times of 1895 and read the news and see how different it is from today. Same conflict, same old stuff going on and going on. It's the same world in that, yes, from you're saying it's a different world. There were 2 billion people then, there's 8 billion now. We didn't face the same kinds of ecological challenges, the same kinds of, but there was wars going on at that time. There were people starving at that time. There were storms washing out bridges at that time. Yes, it seems like things are accelerating because there are more people. It's become all the more of a giant maelstrom, as it were. But the nature of it is the same. The Vedantic analysis is that the world is the same. It's the same. It's characterized by craving and dissatisfaction and seeking for peace and not finding it until we look within, until we turn within and we find the infinite source of bliss and peace within us. And then we see it in everybody. And then we realize that we are called to help remove that misery. And how do we do that? Only by bringing spiritual knowledge can we remove the misery. So that's the nature of the world, and it's been that way all along.
I like your answer very much. I brought up the question because just to be wondering.
Good. No, it's a good question. In many ways, it is a different world, no doubt. But the fundamentals of it don't change. Any other comments or questions? Are there any things online? Yes, Hannah.
When we sit down to practice and we come across a mean thought, a wicked samskara, is it better to just dismiss it and focus on what we're doing, or is it better to combat it with something better? Is that when we use the thorn?
That's the prescription. Patanjali gives that prescription in the Raja Yoga, in his Yoga Sutras. It's called Pratipaksha Bhavanam, raise an opposing thought. So one can, in fact, he gives prescriptions for different kinds of thoughts. That if you feel envious of someone, well, try to think of that person as happy. Try to feel happy in their happiness. If you feel hatred, what's the opposite of hatred? Well, love. If you feel hatred, feel love, like that. Fear. If you feel, so we raise an opposite mood. Now, if you're practicing meditation and you're trying to think of God, say, you're thinking of your chosen ideal, you can also place that raise the opposite thought of the thought of your chosen ideal. That also is perfectly effective method of, or as Sri Ramakrishna would say, turn it towards God. You suddenly have a strong feeling of lust. What is lust? You want something, you want pleasure. Turn it towards God. Desire for communion with God. Desire to have the bliss of union with the divine. You're angry. You can even be angry with God. Suddenly be angry, God, why are you not coming to me? Why am I still suffering? I'm thinking of you, I'm praying to you, I'm still not. So anger, well, you can also turn anger towards God. You can turn everything towards the divine. That's one way. And this Pratipaksha Bhavanam, raising an opposite thought. If there's a particular kind of thought that continually troubles you, you can come up with an effective thought that works for you to oppose that thought. It reminds me of Ram Dass. I've mentioned this a number of times. Ram Dass, the American author and spiritual teacher who was Richard Alpert before, and he gives a wonderful example of how he was doing sadhana, spiritual practice. And at that time, the Vietnam War was raging, and he was a peace activist. And there was one individual in the United States government who embodied all the wickedness and the crookedness of the war in Vietnam. And that was Robert McNamara, who was the Department of Defense. And he hated his guts. He hated him. But he realized, he was a spiritual seeker, he realized that this was a problem for him. He couldn't be a true spiritual seeker and still harbor all this hate for this guy. So what did he do? It's brilliant and kind of shocking. He got a picture of Robert McNamara and put it in a little frame, and he put it on his altar, on his prayer table, right next to Buddha and Jesus and Krishna and Rama, or whatever he had on his table. Hanuman was probably there. He's a devotee of Neem Karuna Baba. And then he would greet the deities in the morning with incense, and after lovingly greeting all the deities, he would then greet Robert and say, "Good morning, Robert McNamara. Good morning." He was struggling to overcome this hatred, and he must have made some progress. I'm sure he would have made some progress in that. Are there any questions from the online?
Question: which translation of Patanjali Yoga Sutra?
Oh, which Patanjali's Yoga Sutra translation? Well, Swami Vivekananda has a wonderful translation and commentary. And there's also another one published by Vedanta Press, our publishing house here in Southern California, called How to Know God by Swami Prabhupada with Christopher Isherwood. It's also wonderful. Gets into the psychology of yoga in a beautiful way. So those two I recommend. Here's a question. As one's physical capacities wane, could heartfelt prayer for others become one of our main forms of karma yoga? That's a lovely idea. Well, it's certainly if you're thinking one of the ways we can serve others, that's one of the ways we can help others through prayer. Prayer is definitely, and interestingly, scientific studies have showed that prayer for others actually can have positive effects. They've done medical studies of people who were prayed for versus people who weren't prayed for, and compared the results. And statistically, people who were prayed for have quicker recoveries and things like that. I don't have those references at my fingertips, but it's fascinating to conceive that this is. But if we want to do it as karma yoga, the important thing about karma yoga is not what we do, it is how we do it. So it's the attitude, it's the bhava. Are we doing this to get results? Are we praying for others so that they may get healed? Then it's not karma yoga, because karma yoga means we detach, we give up any right to the results. So we pray for others simply because we pray, and we do that as an offering to the divine. And if it has a positive result, well and good. If it doesn't, also well and good, because we are karma yogis. We are working without seeking any results. We are doing it solely as an offering to the divine. That's why it's so difficult. It's so very difficult. A nice comment. If we sincerely, truly feel we are not the doer, we can't, I repeat, can't do anything which is bad. Sri Ramakrishna said so. The expert dancer never takes a false step, said Sri Ramakrishna. Good. Someone is commenting here, good old Ted, fun to hear his voice. And someone says, you can pray Neville Goddard style. Just saying. I don't know who Neville Goddard is, but that's maybe someone will let us know. Okay, well, let us take a moment to sit quietly and reflect on this wonderful teachings we have received today from Swami Vivekananda. And then we'll close with our peace chant. Om Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityormamritangamaya Aviravirma Edhi Rudrayate Dakshinam Mukham Tena Mam Pahi Nityam Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. From the unreal, lead us to the real. From darkness, lead us unto light. From death, lead us to immortality. Reach us through and through ourself, and evermore protect us from ignorance by thy sweet, compassionate face. Om, peace, peace, peace.